Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to the third series of Face to Face with me, Azad Ali. This week we're going to be discussing Kashmir. It's one of the longest disputes that's been taking place. In August, the Indian government revoked Article 370, which actually gave autonomy to Kashmir. So in the studio with me, Basharat Ali, who's a legal advisor as well as a political commentator, is going to join me to answer the question, has Kashmir been abandoned? Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Face to Face. Basharat Ali, thank you for joining us. This issue of Kashmir has been a long-standing issue, in particular Southeast Asia. But there are a lot of people in our community who really don't understand the historic background to this. So perhaps I can start off with asking you, what is the history of Kashmir and Jammu Kashmir?
Okay, give you a bit of the geography first. Kashmir is in north of Pakistan, west of India, and it's southwest of China as well. So it basically is where Pakistan, Afghanistan, I think Uzbekistan, China, India meet in the north.
Right.
It goes back, if you want to take a sort of historical look, you've got to go back to the 1840s. The British colonial government of India sold Kashmir to the Maharaja's family for 7.5 million rupees.
Right.
That's the land, the people, the resources. So much for slavery having been abolished. It didn't matter with colonial ethnics. So effectively what happens is that we weakened Ranjit Singh, who was the ruler of unified Punjab, a separate subject for another day. And so Kashmir is ruled by a pretty oppressive regime.
Right.
As you know, with the War of Independence in India in 1857, or the Mutiny of the Sepoys, as we were taught in history here, the Muslims had it particularly tough because they led the struggle against colonial oppression and rule. Effectively, the rape of the Indian subcontinent, where Hindu, Sikh, Muslim were united against colonialism. As a consequence, the Muslims are suffering across India, and Kashmir is no different. So effectively, the Maharaja's family, the Dogaras, they ruled Kashmir from then until 1948 when the war broke out. We'll get there in a moment. And eventually they accede part of it. Now, the people of Kashmir were very oppressed. And it's a very important and most notable event, one of the most amazing events in the history of Kashmir, which not many people know about, was in 1931, the authorities banned the prayer khutbah in Srinagar.
Right.
And there was a young man...
Predominantly Muslim area.
It has been, still is.
Yeah.
The azan is banned, and there's a young man called Abdul Qayyum who raises the voice against the palace. He's arrested, and he's being tried in Srinagar Central Jail. And the young men and everybody turns up. The time for us, Dhuhr prayer comes. One man gets up to give the adhan, he's shot dead. 21 shuhada completed that adhan. So when you think of modern day Kashmir, you need to understand that the iman that runs through the blood and the hearts of those men, 21 men gave their lives to complete the adhan. Every time one was shot, the next shaheed would carry on from that. So that sets the context for the Islam and the Muslims, but Muslims are by no means the exclusive citizens. To give you a bit of the demographics, 80 to 90%, probably 90% are Muslim. There are Buddhists, they're what they call Kashmiri Pandit, Brahmin Hindus.
Yeah.
You've got some Sikhs and some Christians and possibly some Parsis and Jains as well. So it was a mixed population, but you can say 80 to 90% Muslim.
Right.
So when partition comes along, as you very well know, the formula, loosely speaking, was majority areas of the Indian subcontinent should go to what was to become Pakistan. Now, the establishment led by Mountbatten, they were, let's say, pro-Nehru. Nehru's wife was quite close to, Mountbatten's wife, Lady Mountbatten, was quite close to Nehru. So what happens is, so Cyril Radcliffe, the Radcliffe Commission partitions India. He was an ex-High Court judge. And the view is that they were not particularly favourable to the Muslims. Many areas which should have been in Pakistan were not. And they've made excuses where the princely states were given the options of where to go. So Hyderabad,
they had a choice.
I'm not interested in the choice, quite frankly, because the colonialists came in upended centuries of, generally speaking, good relations. So what happens is Kashmir is left to the Maharaja. The majority who are Muslim don't want to join India. So what happens...
But he's himself not a Muslim.
No, he's the ruler. So what happens, many of the officers who were in the Maharaja's army, Muslim officers, rebelled. So they arrested, for example, one of the commanding officers and acceded to Pakistan in some areas. The Pashtun tribesmen, the local Kashmiris took up arms. So the part I'm from, Azad Kashmir, was liberated by the locals. And Muhammad Ali Jinnah Quaid-e-Azam orders his commander-in-chief, a very Islamic sounding name, Mr. Gracie, General Gracie, to move the Sialkot battalion, which is close to the Indian border, can go to Kashmir from there, and the Rawalpindi battalions to take part in the war. And Gracie refuses to do so. Gracie says, I'm not going to do it without approval from the Field Marshal, who was a British officer, and both sides had commanding officers who were English. So effectively, India airlifts, I think the Sikh battalion was the first one that was airlifted into Srinagar. So effectively, they managed to cement their position because the tribesmen and the irregulars were making good progress towards Srinagar. So in 1948, whilst the fighting is taking place, and Nehru, I think, had a weaker position, takes the matter to the United Nations. He internationalizes the conflict. And Muhammad Ali Jinnah Quaid-e-Azam, he is unwell. He dies on the 11th of September 1948. So the politicians who are in charge, my own view is they made blunders. Because effectively what happens when the UN gets involved, there are resolutions passed, there's a committee set up in 1948, and then there's a peacekeeping mission. And over the next decade or so, there's various reports, commissions, etc., trying to resolve the matter. India wanted Pakistan to be seen as the aggressor, so they should pull all of their forces out. Thankfully, the wisdom was not lost on those who were negotiating on Pakistan's behalf on the Kashmir issue. So it becomes a stalemate. Effectively, in the 1950s, nothing much happens. Then Ayub Khan comes into power in 1958, does a coup. No real reason to do a coup, in my view, is that was the American entry into Pakistan. Until then, we'd have been potentially soft British influence. And the next golden opportunity, perhaps the best opportunity Pakistan had to liberate Kashmir, was in the 1962 border war between China and India. India was taking an absolute thrashing, to the extent that Nehru wrote to the US, Kennedy was in charge at the time, requesting help from America and Britain, conflicting reports that Britain and America did support, didn't support. And word has it that Chairman Mao invited Ayub Khan to attack. Now, if you think East and West Pakistan, modern day Bangladesh, was one unit. At the time, the country had a unified purpose. Had he wanted to liberate Kashmir with the beating that India was taking, and it was taking,
that would have been an opportunity.
Well, it's about all views the golden opportunity, but Ayub Khan, for all of his bluster and a field marshal and all the rest of it, listened to Kennedy. I'll paraphrase, but he was offered package of support and funds for Pakistan. So that was a political blunder. For a man who fought wars, he fought in the Second World War, he was a soldier, but he wasn't a shrewd politician. So that was an opportunity lost. Next, we get to perhaps the next most focal point was 1965. So in 1965, you have what's called Operation Gibraltar. It was again, Ayub Khan was convinced by Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, who was his, I think, foreign minister at the time, and one of his other politicians, that we will start a struggle like the Algerian freedom struggle in Kashmir. So they trained approximately 8,000 to 10,000 local Kashmiris from the Muzaffarabad area of Azad Kashmir, 6 to 8 weeks in Rawalpindi, to infiltrate into Indian occupied Kashmir to start a movement. Again, it was a horrendously ill-planned operation. The people on the other side, not enough people have been told. So on the 5th of August, the infiltration starts. And just a date to note, on the 5th of August this year, Modi forced, it's symbolic.
It's symbolic, the date is symbolic.
He remembers. So what happens is when these people, with a few, I think, special forces regulars in the Pakistani army, start the infiltration, they're being turned on by the locals, there's no coordination, they're not properly trained.
Backfires.
It begins to unravel. Gibraltar
Yeah, no, it backfires. I'm just going to pause you there because we are coming up to a break, and,
Yeah.
and I think it's interesting where we've got to. So don't go away. Inshallah, after the break, we are going to carry on and see where do we get to and what's happening right now. Join me soon. Assalamu alaikum, welcome back to Face to Face. So just before the break, you were saying about the golden opportunity that happened, and then Pakistan training up local militias, as it were,
Yeah.
and it started to kind of unravel.
So what happens, the infiltration takes place in the month of August, and the Indians get wind of it. There's some diplomacy taking place, and what happens in the beginning of September, realizing that Operation Gibraltar has failed, or end of August, sorry, beginning of September, the military then launched what was called Operation Grand Slam. Now, Grand Slam was directed at a particular area called Aknur, which is effectively the supply route into Indian-occupied Kashmir.
Right.
The objective was to cut off the supply line. You can't supply hundreds of thousands of soldiers by air, and the winter setting in Kashmir, it would have been a strategic benefit to Pakistan to negotiate from. But the planning was done on the basis that India would not attack the Pakistani international border. I mean, naivety is perhaps too kind a word for those people that used sincere warriors and soldiers. We respect those that fought. So what happens is Grand Slam is going very well. The general who's commanding the conflict is heading towards Aknur, and the Indian general who's commanding on the other side, he wrote in his own autobiography that they were waiting basically to be overrun. What happens, the general is pulled out in mid-battle.
Oh, he's ordered to
pull back, and one
by who?
Well, the story is that one of the pilots in the 1965 war, a retired air commodore, he wrote about this. When he asked the officers, we were told by a higher authority, which is Ayub Khan, or his deputy. So the betrayal, because if you take Aknur, you effectively have the hand.
Right.
So what happens is the Indian army effectively then attacks across on the 6th of September, the international border.
Right.
Across, as there's a famous quote, the Indian General said, "I will be having tea in the Lahore Gymkhana Club." But alhamdulillah, unified Pakistan at the time defended stoutly. Alam, he was an ethnic Bengali from West Bengal who came out as a first air race of the jet era. Between 5 to 9 Indian planes he downed in that conflict. And the East Bengal Tigers, General Ziaur Rahman, later on, Major Ziaur Rahman, was one of the regiments that most stoutly defended Lahore. So the country was united, but the leadership was incompetent and negligent. So what happens, in the end, the campaign failed. There's a ceasefire, effectively Pakistan and India withdraw. Pakistan came out on top. Then the matter carries on. So what happens is that the various...
I mean, it kind of almost like a stalemate, but let's just bring it closer. And then there's one area that I want to explore with you. In that time, the Maharaja, when he made the deal with India,
1950s, 47, 48. Yeah.
The idea was that they will be an autonomous region, and India will be the overlords, as it were, and that was the. Now, what happened in the 5th of August was that got scrapped. Article 370 got scrapped, and in essence, it has become now part of India.
Okay, can I just say a couple of more things before then, because it's important to just a couple of more points. Forgive me. So what happens is the accession agreement was intended to be temporary, because everybody agreed there should be a plebiscite, a referendum, or a vote, and the Kashmiris should decide where they should go. So Article 370.
So this is the confusing bit. You're saying that there was a pledge to hold a referendum.
Everybody
for
agreed.
The people.
Yeah, Nehru agreed. Nehru was a Kashmiri Pandit. He was a Kashmiri Hindu himself.
Yeah.
So effectively, what they agreed was that Kashmir, there would be an election, but they couldn't agree on the modalities. Effectively, the Indian government kept on delaying, rather like what's happening elsewhere. So in a nutshell, the Article 370 and 35A were to protect the status quo of Kashmir as it was at the point of temporary accession by the Maharaja. 65 basically is still, well, Pakistan got the upper hand, but ultimately it failed because they did not achieve the objective of liberating Kashmir or getting India in a weak position to negotiate. In 1971, you know, the country fell into two halves because of the incompetence and negligence of the administration of West Pakistan, and of course India capitalized post 1965 on the problems. 1980, when Musharraf in Kargil, so we fast forward to the 90s, Kargil, Musharraf does a similar thing to Operation Gibraltar, but again, my view is that he did not intend to achieve any liberation. He needed to make a coup, which he did. He was the commander-in-chief of the army. Effectively, he overthrows Nawaz Sharif, another, in my view, criminal, negligent ruler. And Atal Bihari Vajpayee, whose government was going to lose in India, succeeds in the election. And effectively, Musharraf then comes in to sell Kashmir. That's my view. It's a view many may not agree with, especially in the Pakistani establishment, but the Afghanistan policy of Pakistan and the Kashmir policy were completely upended. And that brings you to current time, because the local...
So just I mean, on the current time, I mean, we're getting short on time. So just, you know, let's looking at the Indian side of things here and the politics. There were many Kashmiri politicians, member of parliament, you know, governors and everything else, and they had hope in the secular democracy of India that, you know, this will be the way forward, and that India will, be honest and hold a referendum. But 5th of August 2019, that all changed.
It did change, and the reason for that is that the Kashmiri people, I mean, there was a difference. Many people did favour staying with India, but they were a minority. And so what happens is that in the 1980s, 89 onwards, a huge intifada type uprising. To date, over 100,000 have been killed. Tens of thousands have been harmed, raped, blinded, injured, and many disappeared. Massive draconian legislation was passed in India. So effectively, the Umar Abdullah, Farooq Abdullah and his Umar Abdullah's father, who was a former chief minister, and Mahbub Mufti, they were pro-India politicians, because Kashmir was autonomous within India until 370 and 35A were revoked.
That's right.
So there was a hope, but the reality is that because it was a Muslim majority state, it did not want to remain with India. The federal government of India was not intending on allowing them the option. So because since the 1980s,
I mean, just before we come to it, I mean, what do you see as the difference between, like, you know, so we had the Congress Party India, a very secular India, to now what we have, the Modi India, which is a lot more nationalistic, if you like. I mean, in terms of the attitude, I'm asking in particular to Kashmir, what do you think is the fundamental shift?
Well, I think what you have is that the Congress Party never intended, in my opinion, to accede, because after 71, the Shimla Agreement was that they made it a bilateral issue.
Right.
So Kashmir was made a bilateral issue through some shrewd negotiation in Shimla. So since then, basically, it's playing the clock down. Like Boris Johnson is, running the clock down. It was never intended. With the BJP government that's come in power, backed by the Indian Steve Bannons, the RSS, we'll get to that perhaps later, but they are people who have got the majority, hardcore Hindutva, which is like a Nazi brand linked to the Hindu faith. I'm not going to, for one moment, fall into the trap of saying it's a Hindu-Muslim thing. Hindutva is a perversion of the Hindu faith.
Right.
And these people basically stood on that. So he is now doing what, for example, Milosevic did after the death of Marshal Tito in Yugoslavia. An artificially created country which then became a sectarian, score-settling episode. And I think that's where potentially India is going at the moment. And the Kashmiris, since 1989, have struggled for their rights. It's unbelievable, the oppression that's taken place in Kashmir since then in particular.
I mean, there's a complete communication blackout at the moment. So, I mean, do you know of news? How is news information coming out? I mean, it's been over a month.
Yeah, well over a month. Basically, the way I would say is people are smuggling things out. But if you imagine, there's nearly 700,000, between 600,000 to 700,000 military personnel in Kashmir. It is a modern-day Warsaw ghetto. The Jews were locked up by the Nazis in Poland, in the ghetto, about 400,000. And horrendous suffering they went through. It's, horrible. The world vowed never again. But now you have a Nazi-inspired, and they are Nazi-inspired, the RSS are a Nazi-inspired and proudly boast, many of them, about their Nazi, the admiration for the Nazis.
Yeah, yeah.
So effectively, they've replaced Jewish with Muslim in the Nazi mentality and ideological setup. And effectively, because Kashmir is the only majority Muslim part of India, inverted commas, they want to sort it out.
I mean, it's like you're saying that, but the problem is there was insurgency. The government will claim that, you know, Mumbai attacks happen, all of these things. They are fighting, you know, people that are committing violence, terrorism and everything else. So, I mean, whilst, yes, maybe there are opinions about the current government and its Hunditfa, but what about, you know, the government's right to defend itself against these things?
It's not a part of India, it wasn't a part of India. As a matter of international law and law, Kashmir is not a part of India. The fact that they occupy it and annex it doesn't make it any more theirs than ISIS annexing parts of Syria. There's a direct parallel there in comparison.
Well, you know what, we actually have run out of time. So I'm going to stop it there. But inshallah, we're going to actually pick it up again next week. Or in the week after, but we will carry on because I think we want to get to, okay, how do we get out of this situation that we're in?
Inshallah.
Jazakallah khair for joining me, Basharat, and inshallah, hopefully you enjoyed it. Sorry we rushed the last bit, but join us again next week. Take care. Assalamu alaikum.